Welcome to the Self-Esteem and Confidence Mindset podcast with me, Johnny Pardo. Today, I've got a special guest with me. So welcome, Emily.
Hi, it's great to be here. Thank you for the opportunity. It's good to see you, Johnny.
It's fantastic to have you. It's always great to connect with a range of people around. And after having seen, what you offer people, I'm really, really excited about what you're going to be able to share with us today. And it's going to be a great conversation. So appreciate you being here, Emily.
I'm
So
looking forward to the fun. Can't wait to see what rabbit hole we go down together.
Yeah. Sometimes my conversations go random, but we'll keep to schedule. Anyway, so what we're going to be covering today is we're going to cover obviously self-confidence as usual, and we'll be going to be looking around helping get the best out of people and effective leadership within people and those around them. So just to introduce Emily before Emily goes on to a little bit more about her. So Emily helps entrepreneurs and their leadership run effectively. Previously, she's run 13 million and 50 million furniture dealerships and real estate businesses. So now she's using her knowledge and experience to get the best out of people. So Emily, I've done a brief introduction about you there, but can you tell us a little bit about what it is, a little bit more from what I said, and what got you to this stage?
Johnny, I wish I would have known you years ago when I was literally in my own version of self-confidence and imposter syndrome and things like that. Like we all go through those stages in our journey. And I call it, I wrote a book called Growth Junkies Unite, because in my mind, you're either growing or dying. You're either at one end of the stick or the other. And I'd rather be at the growth end of that stick. But at the same time, it's so challenging. This is the stuff that we have to face our fears. We've got to, overcome these limiting beliefs that we have about our capabilities. And the podcast that you have here really resonates for so many people because it's the human condition. We are our own worst enemy. And so I feel like the biggest gift we can give humanity is to give them some of these tools that they can apply in their lives immediately to help them overcome, some of these things that we all deal with. And so I'm really excited to be here and see where the conversation takes us. And just to give a 2-second version of my background, yes, I came up through a selling career and then was tapped on the shoulder to run a $13 million office furniture business in the Southwest here in the United States. And it was such a great opportunity. And yet, it was like sink or swim. There was no playbook. It's kind of like where we are now with the pandemic. All the rules have been thrown out. We've got to kind of figure it out as we go. And then I found myself with the opportunity of joining 2 business partners and running a $50 to $60 million dealership. And luckily this time we understood we wanted to do it better. And at the time, I didn't know what that meant, but I happened to find EOS, which is the Entrepreneurial Operating System. It's a way of harmonizing and orchestrating all the moving parts of running a business so that you can execute better and feel like you're in control rather than the business is controlling you. And I don't know about you, but for any of your listeners out there, like the feeling of like being the hamster on the treadmill and feeling like you're kind of paddling upstream instead of being in the flow of life, it is the worst feeling. It is the absolute worst feeling. And so for me, this was very transformative. And from that experience of running a business on EOS to now being an EOS implementer, which is basically like a person that teaches others how to implement EOS into their business. We don't call ourselves coaches and advisors. But the fun part for me is I now get to see from all these different vantage points, different industries, different styles of leading, and it helps me be a better business leader myself. And so as much as I give to my clients, I also learn so much every day. And it's been such an invigorating part of my growth journey. So I'm looking forward to sharing some of that with your listeners here and seeing if they can employ some of these tools immediately, like today, tomorrow. We'll see what happens.
Yeah. As Tony Robbins always say, wouldn't now be a great time?
Oh, yes. In my mind, it's like, you can talk about concepts, you can talk theory, but if you're not applying it, you've just wasted your time, effort, money, etc. So it's all about doing. I love Mel Robbins. She's got a book called 5-Second Rule.
Oh yeah.
And it's if you don't take the impulse and act within 5 seconds or less, your lizard brain is gonna take over. And that's what happens with us humans. We have these inspirational moments where we're getting ready to harness and be at our best, and then we shut it down. Stupid humans. Getting in our own way.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Mel Robbins there. Also a big Mel Robbins fan, and that is a great book.
Yeah.
And in a way, it's such a simple concept, but we don't do it like enough.
That's the thing. We humans get in our own way, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that kind of brings me on to a question I was going to ask you actually about, obviously having yourself, you work with and have probably worked with a range of individuals at different levels.
Yeah.
Is fear something, and I'm really like to emphasize the importance of this, but do you see like fear of failure or fear of what could go wrong at all kind of levels?
Yes. Of course. Again, it's the human condition.
Mm.
And, a lot of times we're coming from a framework of nature and nurture, how we were brought up and raised. It's in our DNA. And, we then, a belief is just a thought you continue to think. We humans are the one that reinforce this pattern of fear or lack of confidence. And so what you have to do, and you know this better than most, Johnny, since this is literally like, I feel like I should just shut up and let you speak. We've got to rewire the thoughts that come into our brain and catch them fast. And it's kind of that 5-second rule from Mel Robbins. But if you're not in the driver's seat of kind of reprogramming your thoughts, you are literally going to just keep sustaining this negative pattern. And so for me, it's like, you can be an aspiring leader. I mentor a lot of, aspiring leaders. You can be in a leadership position, owning a company, and it's the same set of things that we're all dealing with here. The same.
Yeah, I know that sounded like quite an obvious question, but there's often, as human beings, we sometimes can feel like we're alone, or like I've got this fear, so it's holding me back. But
Yeah.
I'm just glad, you were saying it is something you experience at all different levels, because it's something natural that keeps you safe, but actually
Yes.
it's not always it's holding you. Sometimes it doesn't know the difference between that wild animal chasing us in the woods from actually just what someone thinks about us. It's those fears are playing up constantly. So I'm glad you obviously said the point that it is evident at every level you've worked with.
100%. And it happens throughout our lives at different points. And usually it means you're on the other side of a breakthrough if you can find a way to move through it. Instead of shutting down and retreating, if you can go there, if you can do the work, if you can engage, if you can, rewire your thinking, like what we were talking about, you're on the other side of a massive breakthrough, and you're going to be getting into more of what we call the sweet spot of what you love to do and are best at. It's that you got to move through it, right? And that takes courage and bravery.
Absolutely. Yeah. Good point about the courage as well. That's a key word I'm always keen to emphasize. And it's not the absence of fear. It's just it's feeling it and going through it, as that great book, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway, Susan Jeffers says.
Yeah.
Great book title.
It's a great book.
Yeah, it is a great book as well. So are there any kind of, obviously you work with quite a lot of leaders. Are there any kind of like obvious fears that pop up quite a lot of the time?
Yes. One of the biggest fears that I see, especially with entrepreneurs, as they come up in building their business, they've had to work in every facet of the business. And so when it comes time to let go of the vine, that's what we talk about with EOS, let go of the vine. It's really hard because they have to trust that somebody's going to pick it up. And a lot of times what that means is that they end up sabotaging the situation because they end up taking it back over again out of micromanaging and control and all those kinds of things. And so that's one of the patterns that I see most in entrepreneurial or family-owned businesses, things like that, where you're trying to grow a leadership team, trying to create systems and process so that you can create it into a sustainable growth path away from maybe one rainmaker visionary owner. And yet the visionary owner is the one who ends up mucking it up and getting in the way. So, that's definitely one pattern that I see. Another one is those that come into a leadership position because they were really good at the function of the job, and yet no one's given them any training on leadership and management and the difference between those two things. And so again, they feel like they're coming in with imposter syndrome when it's not necessarily their fault. They haven't been given the training. They haven't been given, the priming that they need in order to be at their best as they grow a team. And so that's the second pattern that I see quite often. And, it's easily remedied. It certainly is. There's so much information out there. I'm self-taught. You don't necessarily have to spend thousands and thousands on an MBA anymore. You can absolutely get so much from just doing your own research. So I highly recommend that. It's one of those things where there's so much out there in terms of information. The hardest challenge in my mind is culling through it and getting to the best possible nuggets and the simplest nuggets. And that's part of the reason why I like EOS, because it really dials. Gino Wickman is the genius. He's the wizard behind the curtain that brought all this together, these tools and disciplines together into one simple way of running a business. And if you just plug in, you're going to be a better leader and you're going to enjoy your life more. So that's my plug for EOS right there.
Oh, I love it. And EOS sounds like it's well, kind of what I was thinking then when you were talking is obviously if someone's got a fear of like letting go of something, like, whether it's they're in a new position, then that's probably going to lead to burnout because they're going to have so much responsibilities. And imagine, obviously, I think that's one of the main things you look at as well.
Yes, it is. For sure. I mean, if someone is not at their best, if they're doing things that they either haven't been trained for or they don't love doing, they're definitely going to suffer burnout, like you say. And again, they're going to be draining their energy. And the idea here is really focusing. There's a tool in EOS called the Delegate and Elevate tool, where Dan Sullivan from Strategic Coach calls it delegate and elevate to your unique ability, because that gets you to the sweet spot of what you love to do and are best at. And so many of us suffer by doing the stuff we know we don't love to do. Maybe we're good at it, so we're kind of stuck having to do it. But it's like, that's the stuff that drains you. I would jokingly say this is where the entrepreneurs and leadership teams go to die. So we've got to create some awareness around what they need to do to get themselves out of that, right? Because that's going to transform their energy level and their confidence.
Yeah. And when you're doing, and I don't know if this is something you uncover, but one thing that sprung to me there is when you're doing a load of tasks you don't enjoy or you don't actually feel are your strengths, that's going to drain your confidence as well. It's
for sure.
It's like there's certain things you could give me, and I definitely don't feel like, as a confidence coach, I'm like, no, this doesn't fill me up as much of my confidence. But if you give me certain things, it's like you feel great. So yeah.
Well, it's that sweet spot of getting in the flow of life. I mean, there's a great TED Talk by Mihaly, and I'm going to ruin his last name, but I highly recommend your listeners Google the TED Talk that's called Flow State. And, that is really what he talks about, is when you're in that prime, it's like there's no concept of time. It's like you are literally just in this transformative place where that's where creative problem solving really happens. That's where innovation happens. And it's where you find the greatest joy. So in my mind, I try to get into flow state as much as I possibly can. And, there are certain elements that can prime an individual. You have to know what helps you get there. Whether it's being out in nature, maybe that primes you. Maybe it's sitting down with a blank piece of paper. We call these clarity breaks. And you're just, free form writing and thinking creatively about a situation or an issue that you need to solve. All these kinds of things get you to think about things from a different part of your brain, rather than in the stress mode or kind of the lack of confidence mode of our brains, right? So I highly recommend that work, Flow State.
Flow state, yeah, TED Talk.
Mhm.
Plenty of good ones. So yeah, the flow state I know is something that lots of people want to get into, and they're trying to force themselves into it. So that's a great resource. Definitely check that out on the TED Talk one. So that kind of made me think of something else. And I guess, it's a lot of what we do is about our habits. Like, you can do something one off, and that's great to take action, but what we do consistently is key. So do you often help people understand their habits a little bit more and dissect that down a little bit?
Yes, I love that this is where the conversation is taking us, because I feel like, especially right now, during the uncertainty of this pandemic, with Omicron coming around and all these variables that keep coming at us,
Mm.
it keeps us on uneven footing. And talk about shaking your, not only your confidence, but really, like, again, we don't have a playbook right now. And so I developed a workshop based on a book from Tiffany Dufu, and I recommend this book highly. It's called Drop the Ball. And what I call the workshop is drop the ball, do more of what matters. Because again, once you get really focused on what you love to do and are best at, it gets a lot easier to know what to say no to. And this is about having a filter. It's about having the focus. And there's a tool from EOS that I highly recommend, and it's free. The Delegate and Elevate tool is free. This vision traction organizer that I'm going to talk about is free. It's something you can use whether you're a business leader, business owner, and you're applying it to running your business. There's also a personal plan version of the vision traction organizer that you can apply for just your personal life. And the idea behind it is that once you start to understand who you are, where you want to go, start figuring out how you're going to get there by reverse engineering from a big picture, getting down and cascading it into a 1-year plan and quarterly, what we call rocks or goals. It's a Stephen Covey term if you're not familiar with it, but it's getting you to focus on the fewer things that are going to get you the most results. And as a previous perfectionist and like a 3 on the Enneagram, it used to be that I would just climb every single mountain I could figure out and think of. And I would never even make it to base camp.
Mm.
Now, what I understand is that less is more. There's more power in that priming for focus. And if you'll use this tool, like the Delegate and Elevate, like the Vision Traction Organizer, those things will help you start to have that filter to know what to say no to. And that's really vital right now. That's how you minimize burnout, right? That's how you get to that sweet spot of really what you love to do and are best at. There
Yeah.
you go.
Yeah, no, and when you mentioned Stephen Covey there, I remember one of the chapters, one of the 7 habits is begin with the end in mind. So that's
Yes.
allowing you to see that vision and actually working on it. So
Yes. Yes. If you don't have kind of that North Star guiding you, I love the idea of flow, because what it means is if you do have, this concept of begin with the end in mind, being in the flow is going to be so much easier. And then you've got to have also your antenna up. This is where, if there's a rock or a boulder in the stream and you need to kind of paddle around it, you have the ability to do that. If you find that there's a place that you want to dock and you want to go, have a nice picnic lunch for the day, you've got to have your antenna up for that perfect beach spot to go do that. This is what happened to me, in terms of having a leadership opportunity. I went from being a individual contributor in a sales role to literally running a business as a general manager. And I couldn't have done that if I didn't have my antenna up, primed and ready for opportunities, right? So it's like you got to know what you want and then be paying attention to life signals that is being given to you. And a lot of times, out of fear, out of lack of confidence, out of this, that, like we talked about, the imposter syndrome, it would have been very easy for me to say, oh no, I can't do that general manager job. How would I do that? I'm not ready for it. And yet I jumped in both feet. And it was the greatest experience. I'm forever grateful for the Adam Goodman. He's the one that gave me that chance. And I'll tell you, when you're again in that flow of life, it gets easier to receive those opportunities, right? So hopefully your listeners are kind of primed for that already, especially if they're following your podcast, Johnny.
no, thank you. One thing, you know, with the day-to-day lives, with our day-to-day lives, and kind of what you're talking about, having like the antenna up and stuff like that, you've got, you know, you can get into this autopilot mode where you're living off to-dos and things that aren't necessarily your agenda. They're just things that are coming at you, right?
Yeah.
And I remember, and I was listening to Time of Your Life the other day, actually, and it just reminded me of a point that you prompted me to remember there as well. And it's the question of what do I want, where, you know, where am I going, rather than all these things you fear, like you say, maybe imposter syndrome comes up, rather than what do I have to do? Because what do I
Right.
have to do is just like an endless list of things you've got to do, as opposed to having that vision that you're talking about and going for, and actually it aligns and you're going to be more in flow state.
Yeah, the difference is living with purpose. You know,
Mm.
instead of just kind of going about things from a rote fashion, or the have to place of tasks and lists and all those sorts of things. It's making sure that it's aligning to your greater purpose that you have for yourself, right?
Mm.
And then those things take shape and meaning, and you can find joy in them because they cascade into your why, what's important to you. I love Simon Sinek's TED Talk, since we've been talking about
Yeah.
a lot of those. He's got such a great one there that, you know, it's like no one lines up for Dell computers overnight, right? But they do for Apple. And it's because it's like there's a bigger why there. Love that work.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's yeah, I remember that circle now. The book was good as well. It's the start of the why, then the how, then the what. Yeah,
Yes.
I suppose
So
it's most
you
like
do,
what
you work
most
with these
people's what.
circumference circles.
Yeah,
Yes, that's exactly right.
most people was, you know, most of us will start with like what, basically
Yes,
do's rather than the why. Yeah,
that's right.
love that. Love that talk. You reminded me to go reread that book now, so thanks for that. Appreciate that. So, what would you say to someone who, I'm always very, very passionate about this subject, but what would you say to someone who says they don't have enough time to do what they want?
Well, again, in my mind, when I hear people using the term busy or
Mm,
I don't have time, what that tells me is that they haven't done some of this work that we've already been talking about. You know, they don't have that sense of purpose, and they haven't built kind of this framework of, you know, what I would call a plan that helps them understand how to better utilize their time. So they do feel like they have more time. I don't have this limiting um, um, picture of time anymore. It's not like a finite pie. And now it's just kind of expanded for me because of how I frame things based on using some of these tools that we've been talking about. And so it's really about how I want to use my time, not the limitation of time. And when you take it out of that, you know, that again, kind of limiting belief concept that there's, you know, it's not that there's the only so much time, because it's true, time is finite. What it is how you use it. And are you using it in a way that makes you feel that you are in this flow state that we've been talking about? Because when you are, you won't feel busy and you won't feel the compression of time. So hopefully that kind of helps with your listeners with, you know, the power that's behind some of these tools that we've been talking about.
yeah, and I like what you said, going back again to under doing that work to actually find some time to, you know, schedule it. And if you can't find time to do that, you're never really going to have a life. Let's just be honest about it.
That's
Um,
right.
Rather, it's just going to be reactive and yeah,
Well, like Stephen Covey says, since we're
yeah,
back to that,
oh yeah,
put first things first. That's how he comes up with this term rocks. He says, he gives this beautiful demonstration on a table where he's got a jar and then he's got rocks and pebbles and sand and water. And he starts by putting all these other things into the jar first, the pebbles, the sand, and the water. Then he tries to put the rocks in and they don't fit. And those are supposed to be your biggest and highest priorities. Then he does the demonstration where he puts the rocks in first, and then the pebble, sand, and the water, and everything fits. And so you've got to start with focus. You've got to start with purpose. You've got to start with this North Star of where you're going and how you want to get there, right? You got to start with the biggest priorities. And what we say in EOS terminology is take the 20-80 approach. The 20% of the things that are going to get you 80% of the results, start with those. Don't start with other people's perception of what's urgent and important. Start with what you think is important first. And if you'll do that, then again, you will absolutely feel an abundance of time rather than a lack of time. It will actually free up time. That's the thing that I've found, is that I've been able to get involved in my community with volunteer work. I'm a mentor on a global mentoring platform called the Mentoring Club. There's all this stuff that I do now that feeds my soul, my sense of purpose, because I found this abundance of time.
Yeah.
Powerful, really powerful.
Yeah. And it sounds like you've obviously learned it from various leaders out there as well, from people like Stephen Covey, who's obviously written that amazing book and done lots and lots of work on it. So
Yeah.
how important is it for someone to get a good role model? Because sometimes we can take advice, and we're not always conscious of this, but we can take advice, we can get bad advice sometimes. Like, for example, your broke friend who gives you financial advice, or your single friend who gives you relationship
Dating
advice.
advice, right?
Yeah. So how important is it to get a good role model, and has that played a big role in your life?
I call having a board of advisors. And the reason why is that it's good to have kind of a small select group of people that you depend on, trust, and that you offer mutual value support. And I find that, again, this is the sweet spot for me. I feel like we are here on this planet to serve and help each other. And it's part of the reason why I do so much in the mentoring space, both in the mentoring club that I already spoke about, but also with young leaders coming up through my commercial real estate industry. It's because I feel like that is the biggest way to give back. These are the people that are going to be in the driver's seat of leadership, of steering our planet in the right direction. And the more that we can do to set them on a good path, the better off we're going to be when they're taking care of us, right? And I found that so often in my growth journey, that when I was able to connect with someone in this kind of mentoring role, whether I was the mentor or I was asking a mentor to help me, it was like such a giving and receiving partnership. It wasn't a one-way conduit. I would find that it was something where I would be in a learning mode when I was actually teaching something. So, I feel like that's really, the nexus of why having a board of advisors is so important. And then, kind of figuring out who you can trust. It's going to take some time. It's going to be casting a net out there and kind of looking at people for some of the strengths that they bring. And, the reason why maybe you don't have one, so that you don't get bad dating advice from the single person, right? But, it's you got to have your tribe. You got to have the people that you trust out there. I mean, that's what makes the world go round.
A good quality bunch of peers around you,
Mm-hmm.
say. Yeah. Because
Absolutely.
that's really important for your confidence. As I talk about often on here, you can, always encouraging the self-talk, but that should be alongside the action and the continual habits you're developing on yourself to move towards what you want, whilst you've got that good self-talk. But if you're doing that, but you're constantly bombarded with perhaps this negative peer group that you've been with for your life, but it's just, the norm for you now, but it doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
You basically, it's always going to be a challenge to believing in yourself and actually going for what you want. Like we've talked about actually having that vision today. We've referenced quite a lot of Stephen Covey, and actually having that vision. But if you've got that negative peer group as opposed to that advisory board that you've talked about, it's always going to be a challenge, right? So
Yeah, 100% agree with you. I think what's the phrase? You are who you surround yourself with. Like if you look at the 5 people that you're closest with, it's a direct reflection on a little bit of insight about yourself. So I think that's a really good evaluation process. You are who you surround yourself with, and quality begets quality. So, if you feel like you want to up your game, then go find out where those people hang out, and go seek it out. That's one of the things that I did was, if I wanted to see myself as a business leader, I needed to surround myself with those kinds of people. So I got involved with a peer-to-peer group called Vistage. There's a number of them out there, but it was a great way for me to learn how to run a business and learn the challenges that other business owners and leaders face in a safe haven, a confidential haven where we could kind of work things out together. So that's a great example of a structured version of this kind of board of advisors concept that we're talking about.
Yeah. And it kind of leads me on to my next point, because I was thinking, obviously, sometimes those opportunities, you do need to invest a little bit into yourself to actually find those quality peer groups. And there's one training I was on, and I've heard it a few times since, when you hear something once and then suddenly you start hearing it, and it's pay for friends is sometimes a good thing. You're paying for a good quality peer group. So that kind of brings me on to the next point, which is, how important would you say it is to invest in yourself?
Critical. Absolutely critical. No one else is going to do it, right? You've got to want it for yourself first. And if you're hungry enough, there's so much out there available for free or through grants or what have you. If you're hungry enough, you can go get it. And the biggest thing is, it's taking, like, if you Google search the word growth, you're going to get so many resources and tools. It's kind of figuring out the best and fewest and then focusing in on that. And that's going to take some time. It's going to take some research, right? And yet it's so worth it, because the net result is you're going to be in the driver's seat, and it's going to not only help you gain confidence, but it's going to get you on the path to where you want to go. And we are in control of that. I have the hardest time with people that want to blame others or blame their circumstances or things like that. I don't have a lot of patience for it, because I understand that that's where we came from, but that's not where we're going. If you want more, it's out there for you. It is absolutely out there for you. So it's really, this the sweet spot of being hungry enough to go get it. Because if you are hungry, you can take it from being in a job and saying that you want to do your own startup business. If you want it bad enough, you'll figure out how to make both of them work so that you can start to slowly make that migration over time. Same thing is true for anything that you want. If you're hungry enough, you'll figure it out. And there may be some barriers along the way, but that just means you're on the other side of a breakthrough. I mean, how many countless stories have we heard from everyone's success stories about how they've heard no so many times, what they had to overcome, right? And again, I think that it doesn't necessarily have to be hard. It's like, if you can figure it out and have the hunger to go do it, you'll make it happen. And that's part of getting in that flow state again, and being very clear about what you want, right? So I don't know. I'm not trying to be too Pollyanna, but at the same time, I feel like there's so much opportunity in this day and age, and there's so many people that are doing it. They're already figuring it out and doing it. So go find somebody successful and ask them what they did and how they did it, right? Interview them. That's like step one. And that will give you some energy and inspiration to go on your own growth path. So there you go. My two cents.
Yeah, no, it's really valuable, because obviously investment doesn't just mean money into yourself. It means time into yourself. It means energy into yourself.
Yes.
And
yes.
Yeah, of course, going into like a group or getting a coach or mentor or, one of those, peer groups, did I say that already? But anyway, that might be a bit of an investment that could potentially speed up the process. But whether, spending money or not, you're still going to have to spend energy and effort into yourself. But
That's
if you're
right.
where you want to, that's really, really key. And obviously we live in a world which is sometimes a bit full of our instant gratification. So sometimes we don't always do it. So it's always, I like what you said about what do you want, and then also leads back to what you said about your why and start of your why. This Simon
If you
Sinek
start
example.
with that, then you'll have the persistence to see it through.
Mm,
If your why isn't strong enough, then at the first obstacle you face, you'll fall apart and you'll let the lizard brain take over instead of the Mel Robbins 5-second rule. And so it's got to be something so strong that it creates that powerful engine that will sustain you. And sometimes having an accountability buddy, whether it's a friend, a
yeah.
mentor, like we've talked about, any of those kinds of things, could be the help that you need in order to help you move through instead of feeling alone or siloed. Having that ability to have somebody that can say, it's okay, pick yourself up. This too shall pass. And on the other side of this, you're just waiting for the next breakthrough.
Mm. Yeah, I
So yeah,
love the advice about accountability partner as well, because it can be quite, a lonely journey, especially if you're
yes.
an entrepreneur out there, and particularly if you're in a environment where people aren't necessarily come from that entrepreneur side, and they're, and it's nothing wrong. It's completely, again, it's up to you what you want, but it can be a lonely journey if you're not necessarily there. So love the power of an accountability partner. And
That's right.
what you said about the the reptilian brain like playing up if our why's not strong enough. I love the way it can't, like the excuses and like the BS it will come up with basically to like tell us something else. It's not the right time, maybe I'll do that later.
Mhm.
Procrastination, all those kind of things, which it's masking the real fear behind it. So
Yep.
yeah, you need that strong why that needs to be a stronger drive than just than to get over those hurdles. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
you got it, Johnny.
So before we kind of like close off, Emily, I really wanted to kind of see if you had any kind of final points where you wanted to tell us a little bit more
Sure.
about EOS.
Sure. I think,
Covered
one
a
of
lot,
the
obviously, today, but
yeah,
yeah,
we covered a lot together today. And I think the most important thing is that if any of your listeners are interested in learning more, it's so easy to Google EOS. It's the Entrepreneurial Operating System. But if you literally Google EOS, you'll find it. And the idea is that it's just such a simple set of tools and principles based on Gino Wickman's knowledge of the 6 key components of any business in any industry. It's vision, people, data, issues, process, and traction. Those are the 6 things that if you'll focus on those simultaneously, the business will get easier and easier to run and manage. And so the idea is that this really gives people that are running a business the framework for how to do it more effectively and efficiently. It's a means of execution. And so that's really what EOS is. I always call it like it's a journey. So you're at a starting point.
mm,
And it's like building a muscle. It's like a triathlete. You've got to eat the right foods and have the right coach and be a part of the right team and train your muscle and to get the results you want as a triathlete. The same is true with EOS. And the nice thing about it is that once you get primed and are running your business on EOS, it ends up being the system running in the background. It's almost like, on your cell phone, you've got an iOS for, if you're an Apple user,
yeah,
it's the same concept. It's all the framework of the cell phone that allows you to do all these incredible things, which are mobile, but you don't need to know how it works. This all runs in the background that allows you then to focus on the sweet spot of your business, what your business is really primed to do, what you love to do and are best at with your business. And so that's a little bit about what EOS really is. And then the idea is that if you are applying these tools and principles that we've been talking about today, it's all not only going to make you a better, effective business leader, but it's going to affect your personal life in ways that are so profound. It has for me. Again, in terms of being able to carve out this operational freedom from the day to day to do other things that I really love, has just been so profound for me. So I can't speak highly enough about it. And for your listeners, I am offering a 90-minute workshop that will give them the 6 key components of their business and also the 2 tools and disciplines of each of those 6 that we work to strengthen. And again, those tools are free. They're available even in the book Traction from Gino Wickman. They're available online. You can contact me if you'd like to get access to them. So, this is kind of the EOS value of helping first. Like, we really believe in helping people get more of what they want from their businesses. So hopefully that reaches your listeners. The other thing I have for your listeners that is a little freebie here is the VIP code to my book. So if they go to growthjunkiesunite.com and then they type /VIP, they can get the VIP from my book. So that gives them the discount. And then they also get a free toolkit that goes along with it. That's got everything from all my source material that I use to top TED Talks, everything like that, it's kind of like taking the Reader Digest version of all this material that's out there and condensing it down into the best few. And then they can go get on their growth learning journey themselves. So that's another one. And then if they want to email me, your listeners can email me for the Vision Traction Organizer, for the Delegate and Elevate tool. So I'll give you that email here. It's EF as in Frank Ransone, and it's RANSONE. And so those are both N as in Nancy, efransone@gmail.com. And I'm super searchable on the internet. I apparently have a pretty rare name, so you can find me pretty easily just by typing in my name. So hopefully that really lands the plane for your listeners and gives them stuff that they can do literally today, tomorrow, as soon as they have that 5-second impulse and are ready to get going. Reach out, contact me. I'm happy to help. That's what I'm here for.
Awesome. So what we'll do is we'll include all those links to the very generous resources. Thank you very much, Emily, that you've
happy to share.
And obviously where to contact you as well. In terms of reaching out to you, which obviously you've given an immense value today, and we really enjoyed hearing about. I learned a lot, certainly, at learning about EOS. So thank you very much, and I'm sure everyone else did. So thank you so much for coming on the show today, Emily.
It's been fun. It's been really fun to, like we said, go down some rabbit holes together. So thank you, Johnny. I appreciate the opportunity.
Of course. So that concludes our episode today. And remember, work on your self-confidence every single day.